For centuries, Europe's streets became theaters, and death itself became the spectacle. From the clang of scaffolds to the cheers of bloodthirsty crowds, executions weren't hidden. They were celebrated. Ordinary men, women, and even children gathered to watch the state's most brutal display of power. Tonight, we open the curtain on a chilling chapter of history, when punishment turned into performance and execution became entertainment. The square is alive with noise. Merchants pack away their stalls, not for safety, but to make room for the crowd. Bells toll, echoing across the city. Men jostle for the best view. Mothers lift their children onto shoulders. Even nobles arrive in gilded carriages, their faces alight with curiosity. At the center stands a wooden scaffold, newly built, its timbers stained dark from countless prior uses. A condemned man waits nearby, guarded by soldiers. His face is pale, his hands bound, yet he can hear the murmur of thousands. Some jeer, some whisper prayers, some simply wait to be entertained. A drummer beats a slow, steady rhythm. The executioner sharpens his blade with deliberate care, letting the rasp of metal on stone carry across the hushed air. This is not a rare event. For centuries across Europe, executions were as common as festivals, and often just as celebrated. What led entire societies to treat human suffering as theater? Why did death become one of Europe's favorite forms of entertainment? Tonight, we'll unravel the grim truth behind the spectacle of public executions. To understand how executions became entertainment, we must first understand medieval and early modern Europe. Life was fragile. Plague, famine, and war cut through populations regularly. Death was everywhere, and so too was religion, reminding people daily of sin, judgment, and eternal damnation. In this atmosphere, punishment was never just about justice. It was about spectacle. Authorities used executions as warnings, moral lessons made flesh. By turning punishment into a public event, they reinforced their power, controlled the crowd, and created a shared ritual of fear. But for ordinary people, these events were more than lessons. They were diversions. Executions became days of gathering, of food and drink, of drama and suspense. Just as today we pack stadiums for sports or concerts, towns once packed squares to see a body hang, a head roll, or a heretic burn. This is not a comfortable truth, but it is an essential one. The history of public execution is not just about cruelty. It is about control, culture, and human psychology. Why do we watch? Why are we drawn to the suffering of others? In this episode of Forgotten Chains, we'll travel through Europe's dark history, from the medieval gallows to the guillotine, exploring how public executions became society's strangest form of entertainment. Imagine a small medieval town in the 13th century. The church bells summon not for mass, but for judgment. A thief has been caught. His punishment is not a quiet prison, but a hanging before the entire community. Executions in this era were meant to be lessons. The message was clear. Crime leads to death, and death in sin leads to damnation. Public punishment turned abstract morality into visceral reality. Early chronicles describe executions like plays. Drums rolled, proclamations were read, and condemned criminals were paraded through the streets. The journey itself became part of the spectacle. Crowds lined the roads to spit, mock, or plead. By the late Middle Ages, executions grew elaborate. Burning at the stake for heresy, breaking on the wheel for murder, beheading for nobles, all these carried ritual meaning. Each method reflected both the crime and the state's authority. Over time, the moral lesson blurred with curiosity and thrill. Markets sprang up near gallows. Vendors sold food and drink, treating the day like a festival. Children clutched sweetmeats as they stared wide-eyed. Families traveled miles to see a famous criminal die. In 16th century France, the execution of notorious bandits drew thousands. In London, Tyburn Gallows became a notorious attraction. Pamphlets recounted last words, sometimes exaggerated into heroic or tragic tales. The condemned were expected to perform, to confess, repent, or even joke with the crowd. Some criminals played to the audience, turning their deaths into spectacles of defiance. A condemned thief might laugh at the hangman, or a heretic might sing hymns as flames rose. These performances added drama to the event, making it more gripping than any theater. By the 17th and 18th centuries, public executions had become Europe's grim theater of choice. Tyburn became a stage for thousands of hangings. Crowds sang ballads, vendors sold execution broadsides with lurid accounts. The condemned were paraded in open carts, allowing time for cheers and insults, breaking on the wheel horrified and thrilled. Criminals were tied to a giant wheel while their limbs were shattered with iron bars. Crowds often begged for quicker deaths, but many secretly relished the prolonged agony. Burnings, quarterings, and drownings became ceremonial. Cities advertised executions as events, attracting visitors. Some rulers even delayed executions to coincide with festivals, ensuring maximum attendance. And then came the guillotine. Introduced. In revolutionary France, it was intended as a humane and efficient device. Instead, it became Paris's main attraction. Crowds gathered daily to see the blade fall. Nobles, peasants, even kings faced its edge. Women brought knitting, sitting. So close they earned the nickname tricoteuses. Vendors sold souvenirs. The square echoed with cheers, jeers, and the sound of steel on flesh. Executions were no longer just about justice. They were about entertainment, identity, and even community bonding. What drove thousands to watch death again and again, of it was fear. Seeing the condemned reinforced the power of the state and church. Part of it was fascination. Death was the ultimate mystery, and watching it unfold gave people a glimpse of the forbidden. But part of it was simple entertainment. For peasants with little leisure, executions were rare spectacles filled with drama, suspense, and catharsis. Like a tragic play, they offered moral lessons and raw emotion. Psychologists argue that crowds experienced a release of anger, curiosity, even joy by watching others punished. It was a ritual of control, channeling collective fears into collective excitement. By the 19th century, cracks appeared in Europe's appetite for public death. Enlightenment thinkers questioned whether brutality produced justice or cruelty. Philosophers like Cesare Beccaria argued against capital punishment altogether. Gradually, authorities moved executions behind prison walls. England's last public hanging was in 1868. France carried out its last guillotining in public in 1939. By then, the world had changed. Photography, newspapers, and cinema had replaced the need for live spectacle. But even as executions disappeared, from the square, the fascination with death did not vanish. It shifted into stories, into crime reporting, into entertainment of new forms. Public executions remind us of a darker side of humanity, our attraction to spectacle, even when it involves suffering. What began as lessons in justice became mass entertainment. Communities gathered not only to witness the law, but to experience a shared thrill, to feel the boundary between life and death up close. It is easy to judge the past, to dismiss those crowds as barbaric. But ask yourself, why do so many still slow down at car accidents? Why do crime dramas and true crime documentaries attract millions? The tools may have changed, but the human pull toward violence and mortality remains. The lesson of Europe's public executions is not only about cruelty, it is about power. Authorities knew that fear was most effective when it was shared, when it was turned into spectacle. And people, knowingly or not, became participants in that ritual. Today, executions no longer fill city squares, but the psychology of spectacle, of turning suffering into entertainment, still shadows our world. Remembering this history forces us to ask difficult questions, not just about how others lived, but about what we watch, what we celebrate, and why. You've just witnessed how Europe's streets became theaters of death. If this story opened your eyes to the haunting power of spectacle, help us uncover more hidden histories. Like this video to support Forgotten Chains, subscribe for more journeys into the past, and ring the bell so you never miss our next story. And if you're ready to go deeper, watch our episode on medieval witch tortures you won't believe were real, a chilling companion to this tale of death and display. History's darkest moments remind us not just of what was done, but of what we are capable of repeating. By remembering, we resist. By learning, we grow.